And it's about on August 8th, there was a flood in Pingdong, huge flood, and he made a documentary about it.
Okay.
Yeah. This is international.
Yeah.
Any activity that has the word international must have English subtitles, and that's why it's an international film festival. So what happens is that you receive all of these films. The theme this year is suffering and rebirth. And there's the Taiwan Association of Visual Anthropology, and it's based at Academia Sinica. The founder is Hu Tai Li, someone I have worked with on films since the 80s. And we could also see some of her films, early films that she has made over the years in the class. So there is an information program, links, contact, and also a place where you can get ticket information. It's a very beautifully designed website. Here is the schedule, theater opening, and the days, and when the features, the new flood is Futaru's film, the 51-minute. I'm going to show that in our class here. So then you receive the films, and this year there's been 400 received. Then you must view them, and then judge the ones that will be selected for the festival. And that's a big job in itself. And then you have to correspond to people, return films, invite the filmmakers who are going to be selected to come. And then you receive the films in a format so that you can add subtitles. So then people then have to start adding all the subtitles to all the films that are selected to be in the festival. And that's another big job. And then the coordination, the theaters, inviting the directors, and putting up the website, and having, the whole infrastructure takes so much time and energy. But it's well worthwhile and well done, and well appreciated. So I hope that you'll have time to attend. And so the article that I have prepared and sent is from this book, and it's called Anthropological Studies of the Taiwan Area, Accomplishments and Prospects. And I was here when this was being put together, and so one of the articles I have selected for you is Taiwan as an Archaeological Laboratory. Does everyone have a copy of this? Do you have a copy? This one?
One from today?
Yeah. Okay, very good. And so I will go over this today, and the reason I have selected this is because Li Guangzhou, not only did he hire me at National Taiwan University, but he is also the adopted son of Li Ji, the founder of archaeology and anthropology at National Taiwan University. And so his son, Li Guangzhou, he did his research in Kending and declared that all of Taiwan is an archaeological lab. That means if you poke around somewhere in Muza, you're going to find a shirt or a point or something related to the prehistory of Taiwan. As Taiwan was settled everywhere at every altitude, coastline, islands surrounding the area of Taiwan, including Matsu Islands and Jingmen, Banghu, Orchid Island. All the places were occupied, and these different ecozones were utilized for resources throughout Taiwan and for thousands of years. So this is what this article is about. And it will go through the Japanese studies, 90 years of Taiwanese archaeology. And then if you find my book, Austronesian Taiwan, it then complements this one, updates this one to the present. So this is one of the earliest articles unifying the study of prehistory in Taiwan. So we're going to look at some PowerPoint that I have arranged today for today, and we're going to look at not only Austronesian, but from the perspective of Taiwan, how it fits into the Pacific region. Anyone's question before we get started, or comment? Oh, there's another article I should mention. This one. You all have this one? This one. From a newspaper that I noticed today. And on campus there is the screening of the film Dick Ballet, and the director has been interviewed for the China Times. And I copied this for you. This is happening on our campus. There's a lot of interest in this movie because it's the most expensive, dynamic, thrilling action movie, certainly action, ever filmed and produced in Taiwan. And I would like to have a discussion about the film, but first you need to see it. Yeah. And I think a few people have seen it. And when I went to Lodong and noticed it was screening at a theater, and I got the last seat, and viewed the film, and then it abruptly ends and it says part 1. And I thought, oh no. So it makes you have to see part 2. You cannot just end it like that, you know. It's just, everything just gets started. The whole part 1 is a prelude, just sort of a, to whet your appetite for the film. It's like a big trailer for what's coming. And so, then of course the sequel is what happens. The sequel is the event that takes place, a big war between Japan and the people in the North Central Range. But I, of course, as an anthropologist doing my ethnography, I can find all kinds of mistakes in the film. But filmmakers, they try to gloss over to say, well, it's done for artistic license and to make it more exciting or something, you know. It's not really, it doesn't, I mean, although it's considered to be authentic, it's still a film, right? It's what it is. And how authentic can you be? But it gives you a real sense of the place and the time, certainly. So after we all see it, then we can have a discussion, evaluate what the film is about, and I will need to get a copy with English subtitles. And of course it has that, because again, it has gone to international festivals. So there are copies. And when I meet with the ethnographic film directors on Friday, I might also meet with the director of this film and perhaps ask him for a copy of his film in published. That's my plan. And we can read about the interview with the director and what it means for Taiwan and this class. So we have a dynamic feature film and a film festival. So it seems to be the year of films for our class, which is quite good for us. Okay, I'm going to start now. And I'm going to look at, okay, so Austronesia, as we know, islands comes from the word Nesia, and Austro means southern. So, and it's a language family of the southern islands. And it was coined by missionaries, primarily German, who worked in the area. And they were studying what they called then the Malayo-Polynesian language family, but discovered that not all of it is in the Malayo-Polynesian world. So Malayo-Polynesian would be from Malay, that's here, through Indonesia and down into Polynesia. And then they discovered that there were languages related up through the Philippines and Taiwan and out to Madagascar, across the Indian Ocean. So if you measure the length and breadth of the language family and the number of language groups in this region, it becomes the largest expanse of languages. What else? What about this place over here, called Madagascar? How did this get connected?
By history.
And in the way this is laid out, it shows a kind of, actually, it tries to include it, but it doesn't show how they got there. And what happened is that people in a village in South Borneo in the 7th and 8th centuries AD were picked up as cultivators by Malay navigators and brought, probably skirting Sri Lanka, skirting through the Maldives and other islands of the Indian Ocean, and got them to work as cultivators on this island. Because the Malay people were not cultivators, they were traders. And as they traded across, they wanted to get to East Africa, but then the Bantu, Swahili movement was happening, and they decided they didn't want to compete with them, and just stayed on this island and did their trade, and got cultivators to support them. So all the language structure that you can find here, it's called Malagasy, can be traced to one village in South Borneo. So this certainly is a spur for trade, and settled in historic times. Okay, New Zealand. All right, New Zealand is here. What else do you notice? Yeah.
I'll ask the obvious question, why isn't Australia included?
Yeah, I was thinking that.
And the middle of the islands over there.
Okay, now you can see Australia and also New Guinea are left out. Why is that? What do you think?
Parts of New Guinea are really some of the most remote areas, right? And some of the Aboriginals in Australia might have not been by the coast. They might have been way inland. So maybe they didn't have much contact.
Okay, so essentially, from what I just said about the east coast of Africa, also left out, and most of mainland Southeast Asia. So you notice actually they're settling just on islands. And when something gets larger than an island they can manage, it's left out. So they did the coastal area of New Guinea, but they didn't move into the interior because the people who are the Papuan language family speakers number 700 separate languages in New Guinea and another 400 in Australia, and they settled there much earlier. So when the Austronesian language people, they started settling out on these smaller islands, they preferred to go to islands that were uninhabited. And when they got to these smaller islands, they made their settlement and a chiefdom system so that they could have a descent through a hierarchy from the chief to commoners. And we're going to find that as a system that developed in Taiwan and then continued throughout this Austronesian language family cultural area. So this map shows some timelines. And it shows that actually it is believed that people actually got to Vancouver, into Canada, North America, and there are legends about these large Polynesian craft coming in to North America, and but they didn't stay there. They came to trade and left. So I'm going to talk about my research, and we're going to look at, there should be this one here. If you can imagine cross-cultural research with collaborative, localized integrity, it conceptualizes work we are doing on the digital geographic information systems, language, and cultural atlases. So how I got interested in this project, looking at language and culture and mapping it to its greatest extent, came from using GIS, that's Geographic Information Systems, and setting up a research lab at Berkeley, California, for this project. And I'm going to talk about this project and also the prehistory. And so the Electronic Cultural Atlas, I mentioned this before, is what I'm associated with and work there to connect areas of the world through commonality of GIS. And I'm working on a language atlas of the Pacific. And I use case studies of Formosan languages in Taiwan and in the Basi Channel. There are languages Ivatan and Yami, and we're going to present something about that today. And so my methods come from my anthropology toolbox. Anthropology is the scientific expression of man's curiosity about his living, not only about how others have lived in other places at other times, but also about how we live here and now. This is from Edgerton and Langness. Growing community interest and advanced digital capabilities are placing spatial, temporal, cultural resource management techniques in the hands of people at the grassroots who are interconnecting with others working likewise in the world. So there are websites and people doing interactively to study their own culture and prehistory from New Zealand through Pacific Islands and associated with people in Taiwan in the southeast of Taiwan, doing similar research, and not knowing each other before are now making connections. My GS spatial lab is based at Academia Sinica, and I'm very appreciative of what they offer for me to work there, and also to obtain maps. And at Academia Sinica, they provided for me to do a vectored map, GIS, of 30,000 islands based on the United Nations Language and Culture Atlas that was done for UNESCO. And with that, I was able then to make a map that matches the curvature of the Earth. And you can go to the website and pick a part of that or several islands and use it as your research base. And it's a very powerful tool that you can then place other features, photographs, cultural history, graphs, and your own research data on the map. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm going to give you some examples. So this is intended to produce a temporal spatial atlas by, for, and with the local communities to strengthen integrity and revitalization of language, to include an evaluation component of languages and cultures mapping, with the results to be a web-based, open source, interactive local community and scholarship utility with dynamic tools essential for interoperability. This is the manifest for the project. And my own research is based on doing a model, a design. And ethno-research means that I do my field study, and then I take my study to the local people I study with. I get their feedback. They tell me their review of my study. Then I reorganize my research design and study for another year. So David Cooper said that no relationship significantly entered can ever end. The trouble is with the significant entry. And just before the class, I was setting up my computer, and someone in Sri Lanka called me, and from the south, because he happened to have a visitor, a masked dancer, and he noticed that he could see that I was on the internet and hopped on with Skype and had a chat with me. Now, it used to be that you go to a place and you stay there, and you come back and you write up your monograph. But in today's world, you can have your informants visiting an office that happens to have a computer with Skype and have a chat with you right here in this classroom from Sri Lanka. And just a few minutes ago. So the world is changing. We're more in dialogue in terms of conversation. We can talk about things that are happening around us. I remember when Hu Tai Lee at the International Film Festival, she did a film on Orchid Island, Voices of Orchid Island. And she screened it in the festival, but the people from Orchid Island, they could not make it because of a typhoon. If you go to Orchid Island, prepare yourself to stay there, because if the weather gets bad, there's no longer a flight or any way for people to come and go, and you could stay there for indefinite time eating dry fish. Yeah. And so the person who planned to attend the film festival could not make it, but Hu Tai Lee used her mobile phone and the microphone and had a chat with the lady in Orchid Island, right there for the audience, and to have interaction with the audience, asking questions about the film and the life there, and how the typhoon was going, and I mean, of course, for the people in Orchid Island, in that region, when the typhoon comes through, everyone just gets down into their house, and they have their supplies, and they're used to doing that every year. It's just like a family reunion at home. People are not out and about, they're all at home. And that's how they live, and they're comfortable in that way. They don't feel it's a hindrance to them because they live there. And had a nice friendly chat with, and I could see that already with our informants on distant islands, with our technology today, we're always in touch. And this is a big change that's happening. Okay, so now let's go to, not backwards, forwards, to our, this is a painting. One of the other features of my research is I get school children to do paintings about the ethnography, about their prehistory, about how they sourced their culture. So just speaking about Orchid Island, this is a picture from a related island in the Batanes, about 100 nautical miles south of Orchid Island. They live in coral and thatched houses. And when the typhoon comes through, the Bashi Channel, it's called the Windy Channel, everyone is just at home. They close the shutters and the whole family's at home, and they wait out the typhoon. And you can see the hands are supporting the house lovingly for the family.
Who drew that picture?
The school children, I'll introduce them to you in a few minutes. Okay, so the atlas looks like this. It I should mention two other things here. When you look at this, there are two things here that I was giving a hint about, and now something else has happened. This is no longer the atlas of the Austronesian language family. So when I asked my team at Academia Sinica, please just give me the vectored atlas of the Austronesian islands, they went further. They did all of New Guinea, another 700 languages. They did all of the languages of Australia. And you can see how many languages there are in Australia, all featured there. And the languages of Southeast Asia, languages of Sumatra, Java, the islands of Indonesia, Philippines, and Taiwan. So what you have on this atlas is, and a lot of work to do all of this, is for the first time you have not a paper map, but a real live digital boundaries of languages and cultures that can be picked off and displayed on your computer as a platform for research. Okay, so it will show you the boundary of where these languages and cultures exist, where they are, and what are their names, and how they can be utilized for your research plan. As I mentioned, the Austronesian languages are based on islands. They do touch a peninsula that's called the Malay Peninsula, and Sumatra here. They do touch base with a place in Vietnam, central Vietnam, where they came out of Sumatra and settled here and then went to Hainan. And so you have this whole region of these languages, and then complete separate language family in Australia, and another complete separate family in New Guinea. Okay, so apart from that, we'll zoom in. Okay, now you just see the colors. And notice that Taiwan is so many colors in Taiwan, Philippines, Hainan, Southeast Asia. And then if you select, like in the Luzon, the North Philippines, just those language families, groups of North Luzon, then you'll get a list, like Kalinga or Itnag, and all the way up to Agta and Ignongat, and down to Gadang. All these are different languages, and then you can use this to spread out into a worksheet about the language groups, other data.
And this is the situation 30 years ago.
Yes.
30 years ago.
30 years ago, this is the base.
Base.
And from that, we're adding the current information. And I'm going to show you how that's being done. So here is Michael Buckland at the School of Information at Berkeley, and he wants to find out Cebuano, a language in the central Philippines, and where resources are related to that language. And so he did a time map. So he's showing here from the 1800s the time frame of publications and where the publications are located, in what libraries. And also a sidebar that gives detailed information, bibliographic information for those resources, as you can see down here. So what he's doing essentially is building a library in the Philippines by geographic location of the books and resources that are available for Cebuano languages. Just that detailed, and having a virtual library on a map. And that's how he used it for his research. So the text, maps, and languages are layers of data. Will include historic maps drawn from stories, for example, the Ramayana, transmitted from South Asia across Monsoon Asia, giving a sense of geography for the region and ideals from Hinduism. Have you heard of the Ramayana? Anyone? Yes. What have you heard?
It's Indian story about the Prince Ramayan,
Yes.
and his fight for his bride
Yes.
against some demons. Yeah?
Very good. Yes. No. Now, why it's mentioned here is because Rama decided to look for Sita, who was abducted by Ravana. Ravana was the king of Lanka, and he got her to his island, and then Rama couldn't find her and employed his general Hanuman to search the world for her. And Hanuman went to all of the islands of Southeast Asia. He went to Java and Sumatra and to Borneo and across the region. And in his description and report sent back to Rama, he described what kind of coconut palm oil, corals, shellfish, for each of these islands. And it became a chart for understanding the whole region of Southeast Asia based on the legend. Information to find Sita. And so...
I thought it was just a story, so it really happened? I don't know.
The transmitted information on islands happened.
Happened, but
Yeah.
the whole Rama thing is like, he's blue, he's a guy.
Yes. Yeah. Blue is an earth color. It shows that he is nurtured from the earth, Rama, Krishna. And he found Sita in Lanka and did battle with Ravana and got Sita back home. And then the people doubted that she was pure and ordered Rama to give her the test of fire. And if she could sit on the burning fire and without getting burned, then she was pure. So these are all kinds of Hindu tests of purity. So it's an interesting atlas format to look at legends. I'm going to talk more about that. And because written languages of South and Western South Asia were transmitted to Southeast Asia from Sanskritic and Arabic traditions as a historical overlay, when European languages entered the region and research began on local indigenous languages stemming from the Austroasiatic and Austronesian language families that either adopted an introduced writing system or remained as oral traditions until the 20th century. These stories and legends, maps and charts, and introduced writing systems will serve as historic evidence for positioning information in time and space. So when we look at the atlas as it appears on the website with all the color-coded, and you can especially see here, this whole region here is so clustered with language groups. And Madagascar over here, all the way to New Zealand. And Taiwan is the furthest north of the language family, and how it's spread out. So this got me interested not only as Taiwan, because in the 80s I worked on the notion of Taiwan being an archaeological laboratory. And then I realized after meeting up with Peter Bellwood that we could spread it into the Pacific. That became another extension of the archaeological lab. And that's how I got interested in the project.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are the colors indicators of related languages or just different dialects?
The colors are simply to distinguish the languages.
Okay, so for example, like the green, that's a large part of Australia, like they're different languages, but are they of the same vein?
Because you can only have a certain number of colors, but in Australia, for example, you can see most of the green area, they're related languages.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the
But
brown
it has nothing to do with this green
that
over
green,
here.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. So if it's green in a place or within a language family, then it will be related. And conveniently, China, except for Hainan Island, is excluded. Also, Japan could be on this atlas, as Japan shares some underlying common denominators with Austronesian languages. And that's a political issue, and we'll talk about that later. So these color-designated areas are a layer, and then you get your spreadsheet and have interactive content items such as the name of the language or dialect. So what I'm doing is actually going to islands, talking to the people, finding out when their language becomes a dialect and then to map it and update the atlas. Now, of course, I cannot do that alone. So it requires a lot of people on different islands doing this, working in linguistics. There is an organization called Ethnologue that only works on language mapping, and their atlases are not so updated. And it's very difficult to do that, as we're going to see. So this is our website. And just to say that it creates reference tools and it delivers multiple formats. And it's designed for documenting language over time and marking the cultural diversity and its history, and demonstrating methods of integrating language resources with other resources in a cultural atlas. And developing language area maps and zone maps for groups. And that would be like your basic green over different zones of languages. For Australia, for example, documentation of migration of people and their languages, indexing of language recordings, looking at original digital input with a GPS data system, and the location of endangered language speakers, which is quite interesting at Sun Moon Lake, where I attended a wedding recently. There's only like 270 people with less than 7 people who can speak their language, and that is considered quite endangered. And the community input of language resources that is localized. So let's look at a time frame migration language map. And this is called Austric language, migrating out of Yunnan. And the person by the name of Robert Lust, he's in the University of Hawaii, believes that about 7,000 years ago that these languages originated in an area, Yunnan, and that is just bordering on Tibet and China, tucked in, and there are several rivers. This is the Brahmaputra that runs out of that area and into India, and the Irrawaddy comes down through Burma, and then you have the Mekong River that comes down through Southeast Asia, and then you have this is the Pearl River, and the Yangtze that comes down to Shanghai. It's believed that these Austric speakers, whoever they were coming down through these river valleys on bamboo rafts to the coast. And when they arrived at the coast about 7,000 years ago, then they came to Taiwan about 6,500 years ago and started the incubation of the Austronesian languages in Taiwan from that time. So if we go to the Northern Museum of Prehistory and Archaeology in Taiwan at Bali near Danshui, and you can see the whole time frame of how the people made their settlement in Taiwan and started a Neolithic pottery lifestyle and traded out from Taiwan, and in their trading out got to about 4,500 years ago, they got to the Batanes Islands, then to the Philippines, and spread out into the Pacific. This is a linguistic theory based on some archaeological evidence. So now the question is, how do we know from the prehistory, the sherds, the pieces of stone that were worked by a Neolithic people, what language the people were speaking. So it becomes a general hypothesis, an understanding that if you follow from the present back through the artistic design, the kind of pottery, totemic emblems, and the information moving back in time, 3,000 years, 4,500 years, 6,000 years ago, it will draw you back to the origin of this language-speaking region in Taiwan that could be a source.